Our scripture reading is from Matthew chapter 25, 14 to 30. The parable of the talents. Again, it will be like a man going on a journey who called his servants and entrusted his property to them. To one he gave 5 talents of money, to another 2 talents, and to another 1 talent, each according to his ability. Then he went on his journey. The man who had received the 5 talents went at once and put his money to work and gained 5 more. So also the one with the 2 talents gained 2 more. But the man who had received the 1 talent went off, dug a hole in the ground, and hid his master's money. After a long time, the master of those servants returned and settled accounts with them. The man who had received the 5 talents brought the other 5. Master, he said, you entrusted me with 5 talents. See, I have gained 5 more. His master replied, well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness. The man with the 2 talents also came. Master, he said, you entrusted me with 2 talents. See, I have gained 2 more. His master replied, well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness. Then the man who had received the 1 talent came. Master, he said, I knew that you are a hard man, harvesting where you have not sown, and gathering where you have not scattered seed. So I was afraid and went out and hid your talent in the ground. See, here is what belongs to you. His master replied, you wicked, lazy servant. You knew that I harvest where I have not sown, and gather where I have not scattered seed? Well then, you should have put my money on deposit with the bankers, so that when I returned, I would have received it back with interest. Take the talent from him, and give it to the one who has the 10 talents. For everyone who has will be given more, and he will have an abundance. Whoever does not have, even what he has will be taken from him. And throw that worthless servant outside into the darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth.
I don't know if this is readily apparent, but I have a cold. I don't know if you notice. And have had for a few days. I'm sure other people have colds or have had this one lately. This is the one that I guess it lasts for a while. Anyway, that's only important for this first little story. It may seem, this might look like a big thing right here. It all depends on your perspective, doesn't it? This set, it looks big. That's a lot of mattresses. I'm sure they're all real. But it looks big in this moment. And I'm sure the people who put a lot of work into to making it would say, oh, yes, it is. I know the folks in Bashaw, because they have a show on right now, too. I know that the people who put time and effort into building the set there spend a lot of time. And it's great. It's very impressive. And in the moment, it's huge. And I can tell you from being involved in doing a show like that, and am right now, it's a huge thing right now in this moment. Right now in this moment. In the hours of work that goes into making it, it can be too. But, you know, over the course of a year, those moments become a little bit smaller. And realistically, what you're looking at is something that happens for an evening or two over the course of a year. And you might think that's not very much. But again, it depends on your perspective. Because I can tell you, if you've ever been in any of these shows, that's a small thing that makes a huge difference to you. A huge difference. There are, I can tell you because I have seen them, there are kids, for instance, high school kids, who've been in the theater program in Bashaw. I've seen the high school kids who've been in the theater program here, too. Where kids that would walk by on the other side of the street who know you and they just kind of give you a little grunt as they're going by because, you know, they don't want to talk to you. And now they talk. They're much more social. They take the time to engage people. They don't have a fear anymore of standing up in front of people and saying something, because they did. They had this experience. And in a lifetime, this might be an experience of a few months, but it makes a difference. It makes a huge difference. It just kind of depends on your perspective. It can actually feel right now, I can tell you right now, because the show in Bashaw started on Thursday, it's overwhelming right now, a little bit. But in the future, it'll be something different. It'll have made an impact. It will here too. I'm sure that the people who are in this show, when this show is over, they'll remember this experience in a way, it will change them in a way that this small little piece of time now, 20 years from now, it will still have made a difference to them. It's huge. It depends on your perspective, doesn't it? Last night, the show in Bashaw started on Thursday. Last night, I kind of trashed a song during the show, which was ironically called God Help the Outcasts. Because I started to cough at the beginning of it. And all I remember from that song is that I coughed all the way through the song. I'm trying to play, I'm coughing all the way through the song. Andrea's singing the song, it's beautiful, it's gorgeous, and I'm coughing all the way through the... Don't you hate it when people do that? I hate it, and I was doing, and you know, you try and stop yourself, and then your eyes are watering, right? And it's worse, because then you're trying to stop, and then it explodes, and I'm thinking, I get to the end of the song, I'm thinking to myself, really? No one at the back thought I could use some water? Really? And then the guy who's sitting next to me goes like this. He's got a glass of water. It's a little thing. But then I didn't cough the rest of the first act. Didn't help my playing at all, but I didn't cough for the rest of the first act. It was just a little thing, but it made such a significant difference. Little things make a significant difference. This fable, this fairy tale about the princess and the pea being in the bottom of all those mattresses, she can still... Come and see the show, by the way. Did I do another commercial? Okay. But small things do make a difference. They do make a difference. We're so conditioned to the acquisition of thing. We need things. We got to have stuff. No, we don't. You know we don't. We still do it, but you know we don't. We don't need stuff. We need each other. We don't really need stuff. But we still want it. We still want it. So hold that thought for just a second. A couple of weeks ago, I started talking about winter is coming. That was going to be my theme. You remember? A couple of weeks ago, I said winter is coming. It was going to be my theme, and then it snowed right before that. Like, winter is already here. And that very first week, since then, we've kind of talked about these series of stories in Matthew. But that very first week, I mentioned Game of Thrones, the TV show Game of Thrones, which I believe I rather sarcastically said I'm sure you all watch. But the thing about that line, winter is coming, in Game of Thrones is it means exactly the same thing to most of the people in that show as the end is near means to us. That's what it means. How are we going to fend off the end? Well, you can't. That's why it's called the end. The point is, you don't fend off the end. You prepare for the beginning. And that's the huge difference. The huge difference. Are you going to prepare for the end times? Or are you going to prepare for the beginning, which the end brings? Jesus is talking to the disciples, and they ask him about this whole end time thing. And last week we heard a story about bridesmaids. Five were wise, 5 were foolish. 5 had enough oil, 5 did not. And then we talked about this last week. And in the end, I said, what if, instead of this being about a story about being prepared because the end is coming sometime in the distant future, what if it was right now? What if Jesus was here right now? And that we could see Jesus in each other? What if instead of worrying about whether or not it was the light from a lamp that shows us the darkness, what if we were actually looking at Jesus in each other? What if it was already here? What if the important part of that story wasn't being prepared for something that's going to happen in the distant future, but being prepared to see something that's right in front of your face right now? And then maybe, instead of looking at all those terrible things that are happening in the world, we'd start looking at the moments of kindness and goodness. And then those moments of kindness and goodness, they might actually start to overwhelm that other stuff. And Shazam, the kingdom of heaven is here. Maybe the point of the second coming isn't the arrival of a single person, but that Jesus is in all of us now. Wouldn't that change the world? So Jesus tells that story, and then I'm going to tell it slightly different from Matthew. Jesus tells that story, and then he goes, yeah, so I don't mean in the distant future, I mean right now. I mean, look around you, and in those little acts of kindness and everything, you can see me at work. In being helpful to others, in caring for others, in healing others, embracing your enemy. That's me at work right now. And the disciples all go, no, I'm pretty sure not. I mean, look at this. And Jesus goes, okay. So, all right, the world's like this. There was a really, really rich man. He wasn't just rich, he was stinking rich. He was like outrageously wealthy. And he had slaves, and he was going to go away, and so he gave some of his wealth proportionally to each one of his slaves, according to the ability of each one of his slaves. And so this guy who he knew was going to be just like him, he gave a whole whack of his money. Did you know, by the way, that a talent is a measure of weight? For usually used for gold or silver, that is roughly equivalent, 1 talent is roughly equivalent to about 6,000 denarii in the first century, which is about 20 to 30 years worth of a daily wage for a common laborer. So a lifetime of money is 1. And how many did this guy have? Wow. And we're going to learn shortly that he didn't necessarily acquire it in a good way, right? So he gives this guy who he knows is going to be just like him a whole whack of his money. And then this one, he's going to be like me too. I'll give him a whack of money. Oh, I don't trust this guy very much. I'm just going to give him a little bit because, I don't know. And then he goes away and he comes back, and of course they've all done exactly what he expected. Oh, don't tell me you didn't hear that in the story, because you bet he expected it. That's why he gave them proportionally what he thought they could handle. So the first one, he congratulates, good for you, you're just like me. Second one, good for you, just like, enter into the joy of your master. Come and visit me in the Hamptons. And the third guy, he's like, you're fired. Like we haven't heard that before. Is that the future? Is that about being prepared? Is that about waiting for? Is Jesus really the master? Are you kidding? How could Jesus possibly be the master? We hear the third slave describe the master as being somebody who he was afraid of because of how he does business. He reaps where he does not sow, I think is one of the lines there. The third slave clearly does not like the way the master does business. And clearly the master is aware of that because he only got what? He got 1 talent to take care of. You can't tell me the master didn't expect he was going to bury it in the ground. I don't think this is a story about waiting for Jesus to come back. This is a story about how we live right now. This is Jesus saying, yes, this is how the world is like right now. We want stuff. There's one character in this story who doesn't necessarily need to have stuff, but he'll protect what's been given to him. And ultimately, he probably was aware ahead of time of what he was going to have to sacrifice in order to maintain his integrity. And he is cast out into the outer darkness where there is weeping and wailing and gnashing of teeth. Or, could be that third guy's Jesus. Could be that third guy isn't Jesus, it's just someone trying to be like Jesus. And when he's cast out in the darkness, there's Jesus going, good for you. Good for you. You did the right thing. To hear more about that, you're going to have to wait for next week, because there is actually a part 4 of this story. There is next week. But the thing about the story today is it's about how we live now. We are constantly acquiring. We need to acquire stuff. That's how we live. We think to ourselves, no, we don't. And we are constantly, this is probably why we're here. We're seeking something deeper, more spiritual, more meaningful, that isn't about stuff. And sure, there's lots of people in the world, I'm sure, who live without stuff and are absolutely quite happy. There's also people who live with loads and loads and loads of stuff and are deliriously happy. But think about how the world is today. Think about the stories that you read in the news, whether it's fake news or real news, whatever you want to call it, I don't care. But think of the stories that you hear. Because we live in story. That's why Jesus tells story all the time. We live in story. And what do you hear now? Do you hear stories? Yes, we hear beautiful stories about people doing wonderful things. And in the PowerPoint today, you're going to see some slides at some point. They're going to have a little sort of arrow thing in the bottom right-hand corner, which is the logo of Six Ways from Sunday. And they are people who are making a difference in the world by doing little things. There are people who are doing things like that, and we do hear those, oh, thank God we hear those stories. But then we hear stories about things that are happening that aren't good. And we don't just hear the stories of the things that are happening that aren't good, like natural disasters or even wars. We hear something else. We hear how people treat each other. And what are our examples of that? Well, what has the leader of one country been saying to the leader of another country lately? I'm just going to leave it at that. You can use your imagination, because there's probably at least a dozen world leaders who've said stuff about other world leaders that's not nice. That's a bad way of saying that. When I say not nice, it makes it sound like it's trivial. They're being mean to each other in a way that creates an environment of hostility. And that is the bigger problem. We're creating an even more hostile environment. It's not enough to disagree with somebody, you have to crush them. It's not enough to say, well, you know what? That's just not the job I needed done here. I'm going to have to you have to say you're fired because you suck at what you do. Why? Why do we do that? What happened to kindness and compassion and thoughtfulness? All of these stories that we're now hearing about people in the news, how people behave. Why? Why? I'm not questioning why we're hearing them. We should hear them, because people who behave that way should be called out. But what are we doing about it? How do we change that environment? How do we change a world that seems bent on not just, you can't just agree with somebody, you have to have your own way, and you have to crush somebody in order to get it? How do you change that? I'm open to answers, by the way. We have to change that. And the smallest thing is a place to start. The smallest thing is a place to start. We will not change that by changing the world on a global scale. We will change that by us changing how we relate to each other and how each other relates to those other people that they know and they know and they know. We'll start here. We'll start here. I think that's what Jesus said to the disciples. I said, this is the world. This is the world. People want more. People want more. People want more. And then there's this one guy who does want more. He'll honor what you gave him, but he doesn't want more. Maybe he just wants things to be better. Maybe he doesn't want to be like the master. Maybe he doesn't want to be like the other two guys. Maybe he wants to do the right thing. Let's start right here, Jesus said. With you and me, we'll just start right here. And then we'll make it grow. The guy's a sheep, by the way. The third of the slaves. He is one of the sheep. Now, if you want to understand that, you need next week. You need next week's story. Because next week's story is the story that takes us out of the here's where we are now and where we want to be. It's about sheep and goats. Which one do you want to be?